I used to come here every Friday, and I would write over there on my laptop. I'd get the same burger and sweet potato fries, and I think I probably have written about 3 books in this restaurant.
That was Bishop Megan Rohrer, coming to us from Harvey's in the Castro, where we recorded. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco. In this podcast, the first trans bishop in a major U.S. church joins us to share the story of their life. Their ancestors came to the Midwest from various parts of Northern Europe and started farming. Their mom and dad met after mom moved to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where their dad grew up. Megan talks about life as a kid and young adult in Sioux Falls. After Matthew Shepard was murdered, they pivoted from art to religious studies in college. Please join us Thursday for part 2 and the continuation of Bishop Megan's life story. Here's Bishop Megan.
I mean, in the way back times, my people lived in Switzerland and Germany and Norway and moved to the middle of the United States, I think just because that's where they could get jobs easily. They said it was because they used to be farmers, like in Norway.
Okay.
But I visited there, and there were not farms where they were from.
Oh.
Just sheep and rocks.
I was thinking they're both
fjords. Cold, yeah. I mean, yeah. But so they moved to the Midwest. They lived in barns and worked their way up to having a house and a farm of their own.
Was this all in South Dakota or okay?
Yep. And
do you know when those ancestors came over?
1700s, 1800s-ish.
Oh, okay.
I did the whole ancestry thing, but I didn't. The numbers are not my strong suit.
That's okay.
I can tell you an amazing story about it that will be 98% accurate and then 2% awesome story.
That would be the tagline of our podcast.
Yeah. 98% accurate.
Yeah. Because okay, so roughly 1700s.
Yep.
And living in barns. Looking for that, continue that farm life, but it probably wasn't even America yet. It was just a new world.
Yeah, kind of, covered wagons and horses. And my great-grandmother, when she went to school, carried a bucket full of lard with a piece of bread in it.
Yes.
And, went on a horse wagon and all that kind of fun Little House on the Prairie sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. But they were Depression survivors. Mm-hmm. And so my family is very, very much kind of carrying the trauma from having survived, all the banks failed, all the insurance companies failed, all the land failed, and
the bottom fell out.
Right, which I think explains some of the, let's not trust anything
and
stuff we got going on in the world.
Would that be your grandparents' generation, or?
Yeah, my grandmother was, let's say she was 10-ish, living through that time. They drove to Oregon to look for work and then drove back to South Dakota to the same place. Didn't find any.
Are you ever why didn't you just stay in Oregon?
It would have been good.
Yeah, it would have worked out for you, probably.
Yeah. No, South Dakota's a great place to be from, though, because, well, number one, you can drive 80 on the highways there. You can get your driver's license at 14. Because,
it's great for 14-year-olds. It's scary at 47.
But that's because, people are going to be having their kids drive anyway to help on the farm.
Right.
And it'd be better to have them learn the rules of driving.
So it's practical.
Of course it is.
Yeah. It's not just a fun thing to do.
It's also fun.
Yeah.
Or
a weeding out, a Darwinism.
There
you go, kids.
Yeah, good luck to you. No. But also in South Dakota, you have to be friends with the person who disagrees with you on everything, because that's always the person when you're in a blizzard and you slide off the road who's going to be the one who has to stop and help you.
Right.
So you can't hold grudges and separate in the same way. You can say your opinions, and people will respect you as being like an honest person where they know where you stand, but then they'll still be like rooting for you even though they don't agree with you. It's a different planet if you think about like Bay Area life.
Right. There's also, I'm guessing, more physical separation, less density,
Yards everywhere.
fewer people, humans, right?
Yeah, our house was small by South Dakota standards, but we would all watch the same TV show in different rooms of the house, which is not a luxury I have had during sheltering in place with my family and kids.
Right. I'm getting ahead of your story, but I'm guessing you grew up in like the 80s, 90s?
80s, born in 1980.
Okay, so, yeah, okay. Let's go back then. So we were talking about your grandparents' generation.
Yep.
Do you know any, or what do you know about your parents' lives and their stories and how, maybe eventually how they met?
Yeah, my mom lived in a small town of 2,000. They don't have a street light, but they have a stop sign.
And I bet it was a big uproar when they put in the stop sign.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. As big an uproar as like in the sunset.
Yeah.
So.
Nice analogy there. I like that connection.
Then, so she had 6 siblings, and so she's like the oldest.
This is your mom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So she had to like babysit all the time, and
She
was
was
like
the
eased
hand.
out.
Yeah. Yep.
So she went to the big city of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. At the time, population like 480,000.
Is Sioux Falls in the east?
The east
of
and the
South Dakota?
southish.
Like not far from Minnesota?
Not far. It's like 15-minute drive from Minnesota. Depends on which way you go. You can also get to Iowa pretty quick.
Do you want to guess how I know that about Sioux Falls?
It's because I-29 and I-90 intersect there, and you drove to somewhere else more impressive.
That's the nerd in you guessing. No, just the show Fargo.
Oh, okay.
Sioux Falls comes up in Fargo, the TV show a little bit.
As it should.
Absolutely.
Or as they would say in the TV show Fargo, oh sure, hey.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so
she got out of the one stop sign, 2,000 people town.
Yep.
To get the better life or something.
To move to the big city. She got a job as a teller at a bank, where she then worked from age 18 until she retired.
Oh.
And she worked her way up from like teller to like vice president of the tellers, who like at different branches and stuff like that.
Is that because mom's a badass, or?
Yeah, I mean, she worked really hard. You gotta be like I think you can only like be off in the change drawer like twice, and then you can't be a teller anymore. So you have to be like very specific. But my parents got divorced when I was 6, so she we did the like go through the WIC line and get powdered milk and giant blocks of cheese kind of stuff for a while.
Okay.
And she just is very determined to like save and be fiscally responsible and like pay off bills and all of those things. And all the stuff you want a banker to care about, right?
I was going to say she found the right profession.
Yeah, no, it was good. Well, and it's all the like if it's true that as I suppose, that the nagging voice in the back of all of our heads is really our mom and what our mom cares about, so that we can like live a life so that when we have a phone call with our mom, it will go better.
Okay.
That it kind of like works out if you end up being a bishop who's the head of a large nonprofit, and right, because then you're fiscally responsible and you save, and it meant when I came to the Bay Area and I was just like a young 21-year-old working with the homeless, that like instead of going out and partying, I was like, I should get a mortgage on the cheapest place you can find in the Tenderloin, and like struggle for years with like as like thank goodness I could get one of those really crappy mortgages that they really ought not to have given to me, but like just kept paying it off, and then like right, and just knowing that like San Francisco real estate was gonna be a better investment than any possible retirement. So that's like my mom in the back of my head being like, you should save and it'll be great.
Okay, so that's Mom's story.
Yep.
Do you know your dad's story as far as how he ended up in Sioux Falls and or meeting
He
your mom?
grew up in Sioux Falls.
He's from there.
My grandmother and grandfather owned like apartment buildings that they would fix up, and were like the managers of an apartment of like a fourplex.
They call it manager or super?
Manager in South Dakota.
Super's like a New York thing.
Well, because in South Dakota, everything's about humility. Like, be in the paper when you're born and when you die, and don't ever think you're super.
Ooh,
right?
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I respect that.
So it's
So that was your grandparents'
that was my grandparents. My
company. It was a like they owned
No,
stuff?
they just
owned it.
owned it. My grandpa was a bomber in the Korean War, and got a whole bunch of like gold stars for doing things that I'm sure were helpful then and maybe terrible. It's hard to know.
Right.
Bomber, right? Drop bombs on a lot of places.
Right.
All over. My dad served in the Marines in some of the adjacent things that happened around Vietnam. I think he was. The stories are vague, but what he has told me is that he was a sniper, perhaps in Cambodia.
Ooh, okay.
So also like, well, crap.
Yeah. Okay, so he was already there. Dad was already in Sioux Falls. Mom moved there. Do you know the story of how they met?
The tale is that like he was this. Well, my dad is like one of the most charming human beings in the world. The Rohrer side of my family is like charmers.
Okay.
Like can talk you into whatever. I use mine for evangelism, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
He used his for like love.
Okay.
Throughout his life and getting out of trouble, maybe.
Okay.
Because both my grandfather and my father on the Rohrer side became drinkers as a result of their war experience. Because it wasn't a thing anyone ever talked about, and so, and VFWs and places where there was community for people who were veterans was about kind of that kind of culture. And
Community and commiseration.
Yeah,
Right.
so my parents got divorced when I was 6 after kind of a issue of my dad's drinking so large that the restraining order was that he had to move to California.
Holy
To
shit.
be far enough away.
Pardon my, or whatever, we can cuss, it's my
Absolved.
show.
Yeah, and you said holy first. Like that's,
it's because you. Wait, can we just quickly go back to how they met though? Real fast, and then we'll.
I don't give her many like stories of it being like lovely.
Okay.
Mostly just like that my dad was this like charming college student, or he said he was a college student. Who knows? He was going to be a lawyer, but then dropped out at some point. He worked at a bank. He ended up working at a bank too.
Same
blocks
bank?
from my no, a competing bank.
Competing bank.
And he did like debt collection.
Oh.
Right? So
You knew all the sheriffs or something? How did...
he did know all the sheriffs because he had wanted to be a sheriff. But
Dad was a dreamer, sounds like.
I mean, he was into this idea of like having a good life that if you worked hard enough you could get it, but kind of in a way that like ends up being hard because right, when he moved to California, he was like, well, I'm not going to pay child support. So he ends up, because South Dakota made a law saying California made a law saying you couldn't get your driver's license if you didn't pay your child support. So he ended up having to move back to South Dakota when I was 12 in order to like work, and had to start over. And so he's a brilliant guy.
Still with us?
Still with us. I presided at one of his weddings. Like I said, he's a charmer. It was at Margaritaville.
Yes.
And I was the pastor.
I kind of love all this.
And I dressed as Elvis and played Fools Rushed In.
Yeah, you did.
They later got divorced, so I feel like the song selection was appropriate.
Absolutely.
But you never forget presiding at your dad's Margaritaville wedding.
Yeah. Oh my God. Just because I'm so curious, those 6 years he was in California, where was he?
Visalia, Glendale.
Oh, okay.
Kind of area.
Did
Dodgers fan. Is that all I have to say to be just like,
Does he talk about that time?
Not a lot. Not a lot. I mean, we came out to visit him. My grandma, my grandpa had this, like, you can imagine it now because it would be really cool if we owned it. It's like a brown van with, like, carpet inside.
Oh, yeah, we had one.
And it had, like, a bed in the back.
Yes. Windows?
Windows,
Okay.
sort of, but they were so dark. And, like, bucket seats that, like, went all around you, like a lazy boy kind of deal.
We had the same van, Megan. Sorry, Bishop.
But we didn't get to, like, stop during the trip. Because I think my grandpa had been a trucker at some point or something.
Okay.
And he had this, like, we keep going kind of attitude. So there was a coffee can in the van. And that was the part I remember being slightly traumatizing.
Is this the same bomber grandfather?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another.
He was tough.
And I'm getting ahead of us, but another.
But he did once win a beard growing competition, and you won like a giant beard.
Okay.
So, full dude.
How
my
big
grandpa.
was the beard? Was it when you were
I think
alive?
you had like a certain number. It was like a time frame that you had to grow it. So it was
Okay.
like a speed beard growing competition or something.
And you literally have no control other than because everyone grows different.
Well, I feel like you
rates.
could groom it and fluff it and
Right, you
put
could
things
elongate
in it.
straighten it if it were.
I know people are going to be like tweeting you right now, being like,
Duh.
"You got to put oils in it." And
Yeah.
people in San Francisco know
The
things you have
bearderati.
to do. I know.
They'll
the
be
bears. The
after
bears
me. Yeah.
are going to tell you.
Yeah, that's great. It's a community podcast.
Yeah.
So y'all came out to visit.
Yeah.
Sorry, another backup real quickly. Do you have siblings?
So in Visalia, when we
Okay.
came to visit,
You had a whole family waiting.
the neighbor, my dad's like giving us a tour of his apartment where he's living. The neighbor goes, "More kids?" Dun dun dun. So then I learned that there were other marriages and 2 other step siblings, half siblings is what you call them.
If they were his,
Yeah.
bio his.
And then when I was 12, my youngest sister was born.
Okay. Are you your mom and dad's only? Is that?
I have a brother that is my full brother,
Okay.
and he does online videos called The Bearded Redneck,
Okay.
where he live streams hunting and fishing
Okay.
in very strange and unusual ways. Just
I
another
love it.
fun
You guys
podcast, googly kind of deal.
you all are a modern family
Super duper, yeah.
in a way.
Yeah.
Okay, so from 6 to 12, Dad was in Visalia-ish area, and then he came back. When he came back, but you continued to live with Mom.
Yep.
Is that right? And you grew up in your mom's house.
Yep.
When Dad came back, was he in your life?
Yeah, so I would see him every other weekend. And at this point, my grandmother, they had sold the apartment building, and she was living in like a trailer home. And so they moved into the same trailer park to be near where my grandmother was.
Got it. I can ask specific questions, or you can just launch into growing up in the 80s and early 90s in Sioux
Yeah.
Falls, South Dakota.
I think the 80s in South Dakota was... It feels like it was a time of, like, Leave It to Beaver. There literally was a black person
Okay,
in
I
the
was going
whole
to ask
school
about
district.
diversity. Yeah.
And that changed because Lutheran Social Services, which is really big in the Midwest and here in San Francisco, does a lot of the immigration and refugee resettlements. And
Okay.
so Sioux Falls now is incredibly diverse, both from refugee and immigrant communities and from the number of hospitals and medical facilities that are now in the space. And so it's a very much more diverse, very different kind of space.
Good.
Yeah, which is great because when she was 17, my sister converted to Islam
Okay.
in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Okay.
after meeting a man online that she fell in love with, moved to Egypt and married him.
Okay, wow.
Then moved back to Sioux Falls. And as you can imagine, South Dakota, you wouldn't expect to be a place with lots of mosques,
Right.
but is now. Right? So
Where were the refugees from?
all over, kind of depending upon which place we had a war with. So Somalia, Russia, lots of diverse languages. Part of that is because during that, maybe still now, but during that time period, South Dakota had a negative unemployment rate. There were more jobs than people.
Okay.
Because people move away and it's not very populated. The other dynamic that happened in South Dakota is that the governor, somewhere in the 80s and 90s, he wanted all the banks to have their headquarters in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So I don't know if you're aware of it, but your bank statements might say Sioux Falls on them.
That's where I've probably seen it more than Fargo.
There you go, yeah. Because the governor made it legal to have adjustable interest rates. So all of the crazy amounts that people can charge for their credit cards is based on the fact that South Dakota says if your bank is headquartered in our state and you employ a certain number of people here, you can charge whatever interest rate you want.
So Elizabeth Warren is not a big fan
of South Dakota?
I'm gonna guess.
I'm guessing.
I'm going out on a limb here.
Well, not of that whole process, right? It was a great way to bring diverse jobs and to, so many of the jobs in South Dakota were like manual labor jobs that didn't pay well, but they ruined your body.
Yeah.
And so it made some middle class jobs that you could, work in them and not be broken in a few years.
That's progress.
Blah, 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 the rest of the nation's in debt now.
Right.
Right?
Right. But what was growing up there like?
There was the school year times that were kind of in the city. So it might surprise you to know that in South Dakota you walk to kindergarten yourself.
Okay.
Like you just take yourself to kindergarten by walking there.
I did that too in Texas, so it doesn't surprise me.
But
in the suburbs,
San Franciscans.
San Franciscans, yeah, they'll be like, what? Yeah. Okay.
I think I walked 1.5 miles to middle school.
Uphill both ways in the snow.
It was flat, but in the winter they would choose when to close school based on if a small child would freeze to death if they walked 2 miles.
That's the determining factor.
Yeah, so we had school canceled more often than just because of the snow.
Because of the walking.
The
and
wind chill.
Freezing to death.
Freezing cold, yeah.
Do you remember that,
Yeah, because you had to, change your whole life. Because if you forgot that it was cold outside and you took a shower in the morning, your hair would freeze and could break off.
Yeah, I've heard.
Or, the inside of your sinuses would freeze.
Yikes. I've heard of contacts. That's something about. Yeah. Anyway, it doesn't sound pleasant at all.
Nope. Yeah. High school was I was on the debate team in high school.
Okay.
So I would go to school early and stay late in order to research policy changes and parliamentary procedure. And then on the weekends, go intensely debate the realities of foreign culture in China or, geopolitical, whether or not the Federal Reserve Board would raise their interest rates, which I know is exactly the same as your high school experience.
To a T. Wow, you weren't joking. I mean, and, not as a pejorative, or I don't know what the word is. It's you were really into that stuff. You're not just paying lip service to the fact that you were a nerd. Or are.
Yeah, still a nerd.
Yeah, okay.
Working on a second doctorate.
It's serving you
ridiculous.
well, though.
I guess.
Your nerddom.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's part of why I like this space, because I got to do a lot of oral history and time in the archive at the LGBTQ Museum, which is a few buildings away. And right, so I love a place with like archival photos on the wall. And
Where do you think you got this from? You said you introduced it as debate team and stuff in high school, but was there anything like that kind of reading and learning and talking culture at home, or where do you think that came from?
I think maybe, well, my grandmother, in addition to having a lot of children, was the county auditor of her town and ran for election for lots of years in a row. She finally had to give it up because someone tried to frame her.
Oh.
And she discovered which typewriter was used, and so the mystery was solved. So it was maybe a little bit of Angela Lansbury in there
Forensic
too.
Files is what non-murder forensic files.
Yeah. No, I think my dad was always kind of a lifelong learner, although it took strange and unusual forms. Like my mom has been a very kind of lifelong learner. My stepmom worked at the university in Sioux Falls, Augustana University, where I went to college. And because she worked there, I got like something ridiculous, like 95% off of tuition. I don't know if that's accurate, but it sounds accurate.
It's 98% accurate.
98% accurate is correct, yes. And so, so immediately after graduating high school, I moved onto the college campus and began working at the college over the summer, doing the summer conferences where you arrange all the beds so that kids can go to flute camp or the Norwegian festival and things like that.
There's Norway again.
Yeah, but if you worked at the school, you got free summer school.
Okay.
So I just took all the classes. Right, because the voice in my back of my head was take all the free ones, right? So I finished in 3 years.
Wow.
And then I worked at a children's home society for battered and abused kids who lived in a residential facility.
Okay. What was your undergrad degree?
Well, I tried to be a sculpture major.
Okay.
And then Matthew Shepard died. And there was this kind of national public debate about LGBTQ lives.
That was 98?
Yeah,
7 or 8? 98, okay.
And
right when you're probably graduating, getting out of high school.
It was my freshman year. And I just remember, I had been a part of church communities, and people were like, you should be a pastor. And I was like, well, that's a dumb job. I wasn't wrong, by the way. It's a lot more plunging of toilets than people imagine. Just keeping a building going. And the prayer part's great, but it's the behind the scenes stuff people don't truly think out. But there was a rule at the time in the Lutheran Church that said if you were openly LGBTQ, you couldn't be a pastor. And so I was like, I don't want that nonsense. I'd have to be in the paper and everybody'd be talking about my identity. Ta-da, here we are, let's go. But
Right.
But, so I decided to just try to do art stuff. And then when Matthew Shepard died, there was kind of this explosion on campus. I had been a musician at the chapel, and people would sing hymns and try to throw holy water on me to get rid of what they thought was gay demons.
Okay.
Which is ridiculous, by the way. But
right. You and I recognize
we know
that.
It's ridiculous, but
it meant something to them.
It meant something to them.
I'm not empathizing. I'm just trying to understand what the heck.
No, it was abusive, and people should not live through that.
Right.
But I had to move off campus for a little while, and in that, I always knew that God and I were good, and I was, I believed it when they said you're baptized, you're good, there's nothing else you got to do, and so I just spent so much time trying to explain to other people why God and I were good that eventually I was a religion major. Is
Okay.
that the way to make it? Like, you're just reading all the books now, you're going to all the classes.
You sort of backpedaled into it.
Now here you go. Yeah.
Did you grow up religious?
Well, being Lutheran in South Dakota or Minnesota is like being Jewish in New York.
Okay.
There are those who go to church, and there are those who have the culture, and there are some who have both, right? So being Lutheran is kind of the culture of how people speak and eat and breathe and act. And we also went to church for like holidays and stuff like that. But I didn't I had done all this nerdy study of like interest rates, but I couldn't have told you what Martin Luther ever had said.
Right.
My favorite thing in Sunday school was the perfect attendance card, because you got like a prize.
Yeah.
And I would take it with me when we traveled and like insist we go to church so I could like get the stamp. That's how they had church me.
That's dedication.
And I remember zero of the prizes. No idea what they are.
No.
It mattered then.
It mattered then so much. And
Yeah.
Yeah. That was Bishop Megan Rohrer. On the next episode of Storied San Francisco, Bishop Megan talks about their trans identity, the move to San Francisco, and their becoming the first trans bishop in the U.S. Please join us for part 2 this Thursday, wherever you listen to podcasts. Music for the podcast was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Original photography is by Michelle Kilfeather. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer, and the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 4th season, we have more than 160 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you can, please rate and review our show so we can reach even more folks. We love email. Drop us a line at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Stay strong, stay healthy, keep dreaming, and we'll see you next time on Storied San Francisco.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcasts.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.